Hey y'all, welcome or welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's book recommendation video. I have so many great books to recommend you guys to read during this upcoming holiday and winter season. About half of the books I have to recommend are specifically holiday Christmassy books, but then the other half are just general wintry, seasonal, atmospheric type books that will carry you through the next few months of winter. Obviously you can read any of these books whenever you want, but I feel like they hit more this time of year. And I don't know about y'all, but I hate the cold. I am not the biggest fan of winter, but it does give me a great excuse to stay inside and not leave my house as much as possible. So it's a great time to get so much reading done. So I hope you guys get a good recommendation out of today's video. With that, let's jump right in. I have a few sports romances to recommend you guys. Sports romances are my personal favorite to read. I love romance. I love sports, so those two combined is just chef's kiss for me. I am a really big hockey romance fan as well, and to me, I just associate those with the winter time because they are an ice sport. That to me just gives off the perfect vibes to read this time of year. So I first want to recommend a hockey romance series that I discovered this year and has now become one of my favorite series ever. I am just obsessed with these books. That is the Vancouver Storm series by Stephanie Archer. These books will have you kicking your feet, screaming, giggling. They are so cute, so fun. Stephanie Archer writes tension so well, and in all of these books you are going to be rooting so hard for the couples to get together. Book one in this series is actually the very first book that I read this year, and I still think about it all the time. I'm obsessed. It is called Behind the Net, and in this one we're following our NHL goalie named Jamie, and then he ends up hiring this assistant to kind of help him out with whatever he needs named Pippa. And they actually knew one another in high school, but when they end up meeting face to face, they think that the other person doesn't remember them from school at all. So they are just not saying anything and pretending that they have never met one another before now. This is very much a grumpy sunshine romance because Jamie is coming off as very cold and rude towards Pippa, but when you're in his POV, you realize that it's because he actually is attracted to Pippa, so he is fighting his feelings by just being standoffish and being more aloof. Pippa is very much our sunshiny girl, so she is like doing everything she can to get Jamie to like her, and there is a romance that ensues. Book two in this series is The Fake Out, which is my personal favorite of the series, and I also think it's the fan favorite so far. This one follows Hazel and Rory. Hazel is actually Pippa's sister from the first book, and Rory is on the same hockey team as Jamie. This book is a fake dating story because Hazel's ex-boyfriend ends up coming to play for the same hockey team as Rory. So to get back at her ex and make it look like she's moved on, she ends up fake dating Rory, who is her ex's rival. They've always kind of been in competition with one another, and Rory has feelings for Hazel. He wishes they were actually dating, so he has no issue with fake dating Hazel. And of course you see the romance ensue from fake to potentially more real feelings along the way. And the third book in this series actually very recently came out. It is The Wingman, and The Wingman follows Hayden, another guy on the same hockey team, and then our female main character is Darcy. Darcy dated Hayden's best friend for a really long time. They were in a long-term relationship, so when it ends, she ends up turning to Hayden for dating tips to kind of get back in the swing of things and get back in the dating pool, because Hayden is the expert. He is kind of our playboy main character who is very experienced when it comes to women. I love this series so much. Book four is on the way. I believe it comes out early next year, so I feel like now is a great time to start it. And again, ice sports, hockey, I just associate with the winter time, so these are great to read this time of year. The next hockey romances I want to recommend is the Off-Campus series, starting with book one, The Deal by Elle Kennedy. This one is the OG, but if you haven't yet read it, definitely pick it up during the winter time. This one follows our two main characters, Hannah Wells and Garrett Graham. Garrett Graham is the star of the hockey team. He is very cocky, playboy type of character. Hannah is our more studious, straight A type of girl. So when Garrett's grades are struggling and he runs the risk of being kicked off the hockey team because he can't keep a certain grade point average, he turns to Hannah to help tutor him, and in exchange he says that he is going to pretend to be her boyfriend because she actually has a crush on the quarterback of the football team at the school. So he thinks that this is going to help him to notice her, and of course from there it follows their romance. In this book, the character development is so good. You go from not really necessarily loving the characters at the beginning to learning everything about them and being obsessed, and feeling like they're soulmates. If you've never read a hockey romance before, this is the best place to start. Love this series so much. I've only read 4 books in the series, but there are 5 total, and there is a spin-off series to this one, which is called the Briar U series. So I still need to continue on with it and then jump into more books by Elle Kennedy, but this is definitely a great starting point when it comes to hockey romances. The last sports romance I have to recommend you guys is another ice sport, but it's actually figure skating, and that is From Luke Off with Love by Mariana Zapata. We're following our 2 main characters, Jasmine and Ivan. Jasmine has been working really hard at figure skating for a really long time, and she has never been the best at it. She feels like she's already reached her peak. She hasn't really made it to where she wants to be or thought she would be by now, but she feels like her time as a figure skater is coming to a close until Ivan Lukov approaches her and proposes that the 2 of them work together to be partners. She knows that working with Ivan could give her a shot at winning and reaching the success that she wants in the figure skating world, but the only thing is she and Ivan could not dislike one another more. They are very much enemies. She could not stand him. She would rather do anything than work with Ivan, and it is a very, very slow burn, but I just loved reading about the figure skating so much and kind of getting a behind the scenes at the figure skating world and different competitions and what it takes to be the best and how much work goes into it. It was very fascinating to read. I enjoyed that aspect of the book just as much as I did the very slow burn romance, so highly recommend that one for the winter time. Next, I want to recommend the Heartstopper series by Alice Oseman. These are YA graphic novels, and they're following Nick and Charlie. Nick and Charlie go to the same school, but they are pretty different from one another. Nick is more like our sports guy, athlete. He is on the rugby team and he's kind of the star, whereas Charlie is more our like artsy music guy. He plays the drums. So they are quite different, but they end up forming a friendship that then kind of turns into something a little bit more. And I recommend this one for the winter because I remember there was this pivotal moment in the book where it starts snowing and there's a snowball fight. Also, the romance in here and the characters are just so heartwarming. This just felt like the coziest, sweetest pick-me-up, perfect for this time of year. I've only read the first book so far, but I cannot wait to continue on. I was smiling so big the whole time when I was reading this. It was just so cute. And they read super, super quickly. I'm pretty sure I finished this in just a little over an hour. Because it's a graphic novel, it goes so fast. So if you're at the end of the year and still trying to reach your reading goals, this series would be a great one to pick up to get through quickly, but also something you will enjoy reading this time of year. The next romance I want to recommend is The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. In this book, we're following our female main character, Kala, and she is very used to a certain kind of lifestyle. She lives in the city. She is kind of doing influencing on the side. So she is very much used to this big city way of life. She lives with her mom and her stepdad, and she has an estranged relationship with her father. Her father is this Alaskan bush pilot who stayed in Alaska, and her mom didn't really want to be a part of that life. It's very rural out there. So she moved to the city of Toronto, and she has not really seen her father much at all throughout her life. He kind of hasn't been there for her when she's needed him, but she ends up getting a call that has her packing up and going back to Alaska to be with her father for a little bit, and she is very much experiencing this different way of life. When she's there, she also ends up meeting a very grumpy bush pilot who works for her father named Jonah, and the 2 of them could not be more different from one another. And it's definitely a romance, but it's also very emotional and heartfelt, and there's more elements to the story as well. I recommend this one for the winter because even though the story actually takes place during the summer months, it is set in Alaska, and just the way the setting is described in the book, it's very atmospheric, very picturesque, and feels perfect for this time of year. And I next want to recommend Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood. This is her most recent release. It is a novella that was released exclusively as an audiobook, so it is a very quick and easy listen. And in this one, we're following Viola and Jesse, and they work for rival video game companies. Each of their companies are known for specializing in a specific thing, and there is this one video game that's going to be made. They want both companies to come together to work on it, to bring what what they are good at to the table to make the best video game possible. I do not know all the technical terms because I'm not a video game person at all, but I still really enjoyed this. Basically, they get sponsored to go on this like wintry retreat together to set aside their differences and see if they can come together and work together on this project. Very much an enemies to lovers story between Viola and Jesse. I'm recommending this one for winter because of the setting. It is set at this remote mountain lodge and it's very snowy, and they do lots of fun snow activities together to kind of bond between the two companies. The fact that it's a super short listen too is perfect for this time of year when you're trying to reach your reading goals if you haven't yet hit your number. So recommending it for all of those reasons for this time of year. Moving into some thrillers, the first thriller I want to recommend is 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. In this book, we follow our main character, Malcolm, who is this bookstore owner, and he actually wrote this blog post about what he believed to be the 8 perfect murders in fictional books. And the FBI ends up approaching him because there is an actual killer who is using this blog post that Malcolm wrote as inspiration for his killings. So they are kind of using Malcolm to help them with the investigation because he's read all these books, he wrote this blog post, he knows the ins and outs of these crimes, so they think he could be useful in helping them. I love Peter Swanson. He writes very dark, twisty thrillers, and this one is set in Boston during the winter time. The snow is mentioned so much in this book. You really feel this sense of like impending doom because of the cold and because of the weather. It definitely adds to certain situations in the book. A very twisty one, and this one is great on audiobook as well. The next thriller I have to recommend is Never Lie by Frida McFadden, and I've said this before, but I am not the biggest Frida McFadden fan. A lot of her books just don't really work for me, but this one actually did. In Never Lie, we follow this newly married couple and they are searching for a home to buy, so they end up driving out to this house that they're looking at to meet their real estate agent. It is the middle of this crazy snowstorm. When they get to the house, the real estate agent isn't there yet, but the snow is coming down really heavily, so they don't want to get trapped in their car and it is freezing. So they decide to try the door, see if the house is unlocked, and it is. So they end up going in, taking a look around while they wait for their realtor to get there, and as they're kind of looking through, they discover that this house actually belonged to this really infamous psychiatrist who went missing. And then we also get the perspective of this psychiatrist leading up to her disappearance. The snowy setting of this book makes it perfect for this time of year. It gives you that very atmospheric kind of claustrophobic setting that I love in thrillers, and it really just adds another element of thrills, I think, to the book. I also listened to this one on audio and I would recommend it on audio. It is just very quick and easy to listen. Very much a popcorn thriller, but so enjoyable. I next have to recommend Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. If you can't tell by the cover, this is the snowiest setting ever. We're following this married couple in the snowy Scottish Highlands. They have kind of reached a rough patch in their marriage, so they're going on this weekend getaway. They're staying at this like converted chapel, and they are just trying to get through this rough patch and work through the hard time in their marriage. You get to see the couple's backstory and kind of learn what led them to this point, and you also learn that in the present they're both keeping things from one another. They're both lying and they both have secrets. I'm not going to tell you much more than that, but this one was so thrilling. We'll have you on the edge of your seat. Dual timelines really just make it so fast-paced. Each chapter ends off on a cliffhanger, so you are just dying to keep going and reading to find out what's going to happen. Lots of little things in this book really threw me off, and I could never have predicted where the story ends up going. Another element to this book that makes it so interesting is that our male main character in this has this really rare condition where he is face blind, so he cannot really pick people's faces out in a crowd. He doesn't remember or recognize faces. That definitely added, again, another element of thrills to the story, and the snowy setting of the Scottish Highlands was perfect for the winter time. Moving into some literary fiction, I first want to recommend Eileen by Ottessa Moshfegh. This one actually takes place right before Christmas time, and we're following our main character, Eileen. She works as a secretary at this boys' prison, and she also takes care of her father, who is struggling with an alcohol addiction. She ends up kind of becoming enamored with this new woman who gets hired to work as a counselor at the prison named Rebecca, and she kind of becomes obsessed with this woman, and Eileen gets in in way over her head, and I could never have predicted where this story ends up going. I don't want to give too much away, but if you're a fan of Atessa Moshfegh's writing, it is very like weird girl fiction, but I personally love it. I will say though, this book is very much whatever the opposite of a feel-good book is. It's very melancholic. Eileen's life is very, very sad. She lives in like filth. She's very depressed, and you very much feel that as you're reading this. You really feel for her, but it is a very, very depressing read, and I don't say that to turn you off from reading it because I thought it was very interesting and so well written and so well done. But I would definitely make sure you're in the right headspace before going into this. Again, it is set right before Christmas time, so it is a good one to read this time of year, and it very much mentions the snow and how cold it is, and you can just feel the dreariness and how bleak this novel is as you're reading it. The next literary fiction I have to recommend is Beartown by Fredrik Backman. This is another book involving hockey. This one takes place in this very snowy, cold town in Sweden, and basically the main source of income and entertainment and really everything in this town is this youth boys hockey team. The whole town just backs the hockey team. There's this one player on the team in particular who is going to go pro, and so everyone just backs him. He is like the celebrity of this town. There's a really big sense of community around the hockey team. It is just everything. They want them to make it really far and be super successful. So it just means a lot to this town, but there ends up being something that happens that divides the whole town and splits them apart. And I would check trigger warnings before going in because it is a sensitive subject matter. The way it was written and just like the way Fredrik Backman touched on this topic was so thoughtful and so well done. It is a very character-driven book, and I think perfect for this time of year because it involves hockey and because it is a very snowy, bleak type of setting. The next lit fic I have to recommend is A Season for Second Chances by Jenny Bayliss. This book follows our main character Annie, and her husband has been cheating on her with multiple women while they've been married, and she ends up catching him in the act in the restaurant that they run together, and she's like, that's it. That's the final straw. I've given you enough chances. So she ends up packing everything up and kind of starting fresh by moving out to this seaside town on the coast in England to kind of just start anew, and she ends up taking this house sitting job. And it is just the most cozy, comforting story. It's very uplifting despite what Annie has been through. Just seeing her start fresh in this new town and the people she meets, it is very heartwarming and cozy. There is a book club, there's a cozy cafe, there are little town traditions that everyone is a part of, and this sense of community. It's just very endearing, and you really root for our main character Annie. The next book I have to recommend, I would say this is part women's literary fiction, part romance. This is One Day in December by Josie Silver. In this we follow our main character, Lori, and this is set in the UK. So Lori is on this double-decker bus on the way home to her family's house for the holidays. She is looking out the window, watching the snow coming down. It's very atmospheric, vibey for the holiday winter season. While she's looking out the window before the bus pulls away, she ends up locking eyes with this stranger, this man outside the window, and it very much feels like love at first sight. They just cannot stop looking at one another. She ends up standing up to go outside, and she wants to talk to him, and it seems like he is trying to get on the bus to talk to her because, again, it just feels like love at first sight. It's just some strange kind of magical weird connection. But before either of them can get a chance to talk to the other person, the bus ends up driving away. So immediately she tells her best friend about this guy. She's like, am I crazy? Like, I just had this love at first sight connection kind of moment. I need to find this guy. So she refers to him as the busboy. And then for the next year or so, whenever they go out, they are on the hunt for busboy. When they're in bars, when they're shopping, she is looking for busboy everywhere. And a year passes, things kind of die down. She's kind of given up hope. She's like, you know, maybe I built it up in my head. And she ends up going to a party with this best friend, and her best friend is really excited to introduce her to her new boyfriend that she has. And lo and behold, when she goes to the party and meets the bestie's new boyfriend, it is this busboy. And she's like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Do I tell her this is the guy we've been looking for? This is busboy. Maybe he doesn't even remember me. Maybe I'm crazy. And it follows things from there. It is very tension filled. This book takes place over the course of many, many years years, so it doesn't only take place in the winter, but the meet cute happens in the winter, and there are definitely pivotal scenes that happen around Christmas time and in the winter and in the snow. I really loved this one because it explored so many topics, not only romantic relationships but also friendship as well. I read this book years ago before I ever started making book videos, but I still think about it all the time. It's definitely one that I can see myself rereading at some point because it was just so good and really left an impact on me, and I highly recommend it. Moving into the very Christmassy holiday type books next, starting strong with Holiday Romance by Catherine Walsh. If you're gonna pick up any Christmas holiday book, please let it be this one. It is so good, such a gem, and very underrated. In this book, we follow Molly and Andrew. They are both from Ireland originally, but they both now live in Chicago. And each year they take the same flight home to visit their families for Christmas in Ireland. They just are like travel buddies together. They don't really see each other much outside of their travel time and being on the plane together. So that is really when they catch up, give each other the scoop on what's going on in their lives. And they very much have always been friends, but this one Christmas in particular, their flight gets delayed and canceled because there are some really bad storms over the Atlantic. So they end up rerouting, taking some crazy detours to try and make it back home to Ireland before Christmas. And in the process, we kind of see if their relationship has been completely platonic this whole time, or if maybe they have more feelings for one another. This was just so good. The storyline was so fun. The banter, the romance, it was giving me everything. This was very close to being a 5-star read for me. If you like Emily Henry's books, if you like People We Meet on Vacation, this very much feels like the Christmas version of that book. There's a lot more to this book than the romance. It definitely has a lot of depth. You see a lot of family relationships, and it just covered a lot of topics, kind of the way an Abby Jimenez book does. It just gave me everything. So I feel like if you like Emily Henry, Abby Jimenez, you will love this one. This is also the start to a series, and the second book in this series I would also highly recommend. That book is called Snowed In. These books are on Kindle Unlimited too, so that is how I read Snowed In. But in Snowed In, we're following Megan and Christian. Christian is actually Andrew's brother from Holiday Romance. And Megan and Christian are both dreading going home and seeing their families for the holidays for different reasons. In Christian's case, everyone in his family is coupled up, and he hates being the only single person because everyone asks him all the dreaded questions about if he has a partner, what he's doing, what his plans are. So he just doesn't want to be singled out literally this year. In Megan's case, she's dreading going home because she previously was engaged to like the town's golden boy. She ended up breaking it off, and so now she looks like this horrible person. She's kind of the town pariah, so she really dreads going back home and kind of facing the backlash. So Christian proposes that they fake date one another, go to each other's family gatherings around the holiday time to kind of be there for one another and make going to these events less painful. Snowed In was just as charming as Holiday Romance. I loved it just as much. Very witty banter. I love the family in these books. I love the Irish setting. It's so very cozy and charming, and I just need a book 3 in this series. I'm obsessed with Catherine Walsh's writing. It is so good. There are so many characters in these books that I'm like, okay, I need to see their story. I need to see their story. So I'm hoping for more very soon, but for now, we just have Holiday Romance and Snowed In, but they are both amazing. You have to read them if you haven't yet during the holiday season. Next, I have to recommend Love Light Farms by B.K. Borison. I know everyone recommends this book, but it is for very good reason. It is so good. In this book, we follow Stella, our main character, who runs this Christmas tree farm. And the Christmas tree farm is currently struggling financially, so Stella ends up entering in this Instagram contest that's hosted by this really well-known influencer. This influencer is trying to help out a small business, and if she wins, she will not only get a monetary prize, but she will get lots of exposure, which will really help out the farm. However, the only thing is, when Stella is entering in this contest, she kind of embellishes the story of the Christmas tree farm, and she says that she runs it with her boyfriend, but she doesn't have a boyfriend, so she ends up turning to her best friend Luca, who they've always been friends, and he agrees to pretend to be her boyfriend when this influencer comes to visit the farm and check it out to see if she'll win this contest. So it's very much fake dating, very much friends to lovers. So cute. I loved the writing in this. The spicy scenes were just so well written. They were very tastefully done, and I really enjoyed them. The tension, so good. loved everything about this. It was just the perfect vibe for the holiday season. I will say this is the start to a series, and each book in the series takes place in one of the 4 seasons, and I haven't enjoyed any of the other books in the series, but I did very, very much enjoy this one. So I highly recommend you read it this holiday season. Next, I want to recommend The Holiday Swap by Maggie Knox. This book follows identical twin sisters, Charlie and Cass. Both of their careers involve baking, but they live very different lives. So Charlie lives in LA and she is a judge on this reality baking show. And Cass stayed home, lives in their small hometown, and runs their family bakery. Charlie ends up getting into an accident one day on set, and she ends up losing her sense of taste and smell, which she obviously needs to be a judge on this baking show. So her and Cass end up swapping places to help one another out, but they're very much trying to navigate each other's lives. And there's also a romance element where each of the twin sisters falls for a guy in the opposite twin's life. I really loved that we got to see 2 different settings in this book. We got the cozy, quaint, small town, and then also this big city setting with this reality show. It was so very fun. If you love baking during the holidays, this is going to make you so hungry. I wanted to eat everything they were talking about. Just super cute and fun and cozy, and very much felt like a Hallmark movie. I thoroughly enjoyed my time reading this one. I next have another Jenny Bayliss book to recommend, and that is the 12 Dates of Christmas. This is one that I heard a lot of people talk about a few years back, and lately I haven't heard anyone mention it for the holiday season, but it is so good and one of my favorites, and I highly recommend it for Christmas time. In the 12 Dates of Christmas, we follow our main character, Kate, and she has kind of sworn off dating. She is just over it. She's decided that she's gonna put all her attention and focus in her life on her career. But her best friend ends up signing her up with this dating agency that puts you on 12 blind dates, and they are all Christmas themed. So it is so much fun seeing her go on these 12 different dates with 12 different people, seeing who she's gonna end up with. I love the romance in here. This book is just so cozy and heartwarming. It takes place in this small little English town. The snow is coming down. There is a cute little bakery. There's crafting in this book. They go ice skating and drink hot chocolate. There's Christmas tree decorating, just all the vibes that you want for this time of year. I thought it was perfect and really enjoyed my time with it. And the last recommendation I'm going to leave you guys with is a YA romance. This book is such an underrated gem. This is A Castle in the Clouds by Kirsten Gier. I never hear anyone talk about this book. The only person I've ever heard mention it, who I got the recommendation from, is Emmy on BookTube, and I could not thank her enough because I think about this book all the time. It was one I read before getting back into reading and making book videos, and I am just obsessed with it. Everyone needs to read it. So this book follows our main character, Sophie, and she works at this hotel in the Swiss Alps. And this hotel is very well known for having this big New Year's ball, and that's kind of what our story is leading up to. The timeline actually takes place a few days before Christmas and then leading into New Year's and a little bit after New Year's. So if you want to read it while it's taking place, that is the time frame. That's kind of when I read it, and it just hit perfectly. But while Sophie is working at this hotel, she kind of overhears things that the guests have to say. She learns lots of secrets. She picks up on different things. She learns that some of the guests might not be who they say they are and might be involved in some things that they shouldn't be involved in. She kind of gets entangled in it all and gets in a little bit over her head. So this book really has everything. There's definitely mystery, lots of action and adventure, and romance as well. I read this one so quickly, could not put it down. I was so invested. It was so fun. The perfect setting at this hotel in the Swiss Alps. Very charming. I loved that it took place around the holidays, and this New Year's ball was just so extravagant. This is also a translated book, and it just has so much charm to it. Could not recommend it enough. Everyone needs to pick this one up because it is so underrated. And those are all the holiday and wintry books I have to recommend you guys this year. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you did, be sure to give me a thumbs up. Let me know down below in the comments if you are planning on reading any of these books over the next season, or if you have any recommendations for me, please leave them below. I'm always looking for new books to add to my TBR, especially this time of year. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, don't forget to hit the red button down below to stick around. Thank you guys again so much for watching, and I will see you so soon in the next one. Bye guys.